Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 276, Belonging Without Blending In. The notion of being a team player is deeply embedded in workplace culture and therefore in people's expectations. It sounds sensible, right? But let's face it, too often what it really means is just fit in, be like us, don't you dare be different, don't upset the apple cart, and whatever you do, don't challenge the norm. But how do we know what the norm is and who decides it anyway? This is partly what I'll be exploring in this episode, along with how we as introverts can ensure that we do not succumb to the pressure to compromise ourselves to the point of imploding. Because that's part of the problem we often face in workplaces. The majority of teams are geared to favour extroverted ways of being. And we're considered a good team player if we conform with those expectations. Well, boo sucks to that, because that does not an inclusive team make. So where do these unspoken expectations come from, and how do they get reinforced? To understand that, we need to look at how team dynamics evolve. When I'm working with groups and teams in corporate settings, we still sometimes refer to the Bruce Tuckman stages of group development: forming, storming, norming and performing. Eventually he also added mourning or adjourning to acknowledge that when a team closes or changes dramatically, we should celebrate what has been in order to move on to the what next. This model isn't without its weaknesses, but it's a useful starting point when it comes to understanding how norms develop. Tuckman proposed that any time a group or team are assembled, those are the natural stages we're expecting to see. And as you might imagine from the titles of the stages alone, it takes a manager with a fairly high degree of emotional intelligence to allow and enable the team to develop this way. During the initial stage of forming, everyone is usually quite polite, and what everyone is doing is figuring out who's who in the zoo. I'm about to share an analogy with you that I've been told off for using, but I still maintain it holds good. Forming is the human equivalent of ritual sniffing, and if you've ever seen dogs meeting each other in the park, you'll know exactly what I mean. Of course, the professional way of describing what's happening is everyone is working out the group dynamic and beginning to get the measure of one another. What comes next is often an unwelcome surprise to many ineffective or inexperienced managers. It's the storming stage. This may be a challenge for those who are conflict averse, but to pour oil on troubled water and prematurely close down the storming is to quash and hinder the natural development of a team. Storming is when the initial politeness wears off and people's true colours emerge. There may be some vying for dominance and the emergence of obvious interpersonal tensions. But storming is not always loud and explicit, and not all tensions are apparent. Many times it may look like withdrawal, staying quiet, and even blind compliance. What some may not realise is that during this stage, many introverts are also experiencing intrapersonal tension. That's tension within ourselves. Questions we ponder silently include: should I say something now? Will I be misunderstood? What if I say something and regret it later? Is it even worth the effort? I know I've pondered those questions and more as storming begins. It's a sort of double bind. Keep my mouth shut and risk being a doormat, or speak up and risk emotional exhaustion. now we understand even better why co-created psychological safety is so important. And inclusion safety, where we know we belong, is Tim Clark's foundation level of psychological safety. Providing everyone has had and taken their chance to be heard, the team can then move on from storming to norming, the word that started this whole narrative. It's where the behaviours and expectations about what is acceptable and required are set. It's the how we will all work together in complementary ways. We take time to really understand our differences and how we add value. As you might imagine, this is really an ongoing exploration and conversation. So quite rightly, one of the criticisms of the Tuckman model is that group development is not linear. It's actually iterative. And the reality is that performing as a team only happens when a team is norming inclusively. If anyone is trying to dominate during norming and dictating how things should be, truly productive performing is likely to be out of reach. That's not to say there won't be performative efforts in some quarters though, but that's not the same as team performance. So the real work of leadership is in the stages leading up to performing, and yet most leaders focus their efforts on the last stage, hoping to improve results. Wrong. The possibility for creativity, both innovative and adaptive, the ability for all to play to their strengths and contribute meaningfully, and the foundations of a high-trust culture are all established well before the performing stage. This is one of the reasons why leadership development that enables incumbent and potential leaders to know how best to serve their team members is so important. Because whilst I wholly subscribe to Maya Angelou's perspective captured in her quote, "Do the best you can until you know better, then when you know better, do better," we can't sit around forever waiting for people to do better. I believe we can meet them halfway and lead them to do better. And yes, leadership doesn't only happen from the front or top down. So I, as a more junior person in the hierarchy, can take the lead on some things. Here are some of those things I believe we can do to help ourselves and others become better leaders. Ask assertively for what we need. This might include asking for the meeting agenda ahead of time so that we can be better prepared and less reliant on having to think on the spot. Next, be bolder with our boundaries. Leaders and our colleagues are not mind readers, so lay your boundaries out for all to see and let them know when they have been breached. Next, claim credit where credit is due. It's all too easy for our contributions to be lost or overlooked, so don't be shy about where you have added value. And relax. This is showcasing your talents, not showing off. Next, demolish the damaging myths that surround introversion. Silence is not necessarily disinterest, caution not necessarily a lack of confidence, and listening is not laziness. We're simply wired differently. And finally, educate that expressive and engaged are not the same thing. Those who speak more do so for their own reasons. And it doesn't always equate to better engagement, but we do need to explain that. In summary, a lack of diversity in any team is potentially dangerous, as it plays into both affinity bias, where we show favour to people who have similar qualities to our own, and conformity bias, where those who are the most outspoken end up being the most persuasive and therefore getting their own way. This preference for sameness clearly does not make for a diverse team, and whilst there may be a biased sense of psychological safety, pity the poor outliers. We should be celebrating those outliers, letting them know they play a valuable role in a high-performing team. When we seek their different opinions and contributions, we create more robust solutions and clearer ways forward. That is exactly why true diversity matters. Having voices in the room who think differently and are willing to bring fresh perspectives challenges stale thinking. As Albert Einstein reportedly said, the thinking that got us to where we are is not the thinking that will get us to where we want to be. Building inclusive teams isn't about forcing people into a predetermined mould. It's about taking time to understand the different perspectives each team member brings and utilising their contributions effectively. So whether you're a leader, manager, supervisor, or individual contributor, you have a part to play in ensuring that people have a sense of belonging without expecting them to blend in. I'm not made for blending in, and I suspect you're not either. So let's all play our part authentically, or we should expect to pay the price. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.